Hey, Rebecca. Thanks for sitting down and chatting with me today.
I'm so happy to be here, Natalia.
So I have a really juicy topic for us, but before we dive in, I wanted you to tell everybody who you are and just a quick little just taste of your story of how you got to where you are today.
For sure. So, my name's Rebecca Tall Brown, and I am a co founder at the Office of Awesome. And I'm a brand consultant. So, what that means is companies who are not sure what to do with their brand. Do we launch new products? Do we merge? Not just the artistic side of branding, but the business side of branding is where I've made my space. And I'm a strategist, which basically means that I get to build architectures for brands. So, how do they meet their goals? And I got into this as everyone's path. I don't know anyone who has a linear path anymore. Everybody's path is kind of left turns and U-turns, and mine is the same. I grew up in a family business, and we'll talk more about that. But essentially, you always worked in the business, and I gravitated towards the marketing. And I started to see that there were specific tactics that we could take, specific ideas that we could implement that really built equity into the brand.
Mhm.
And the brand could mean something beyond the products and the services that we sold. So I took that idea, I went to school for marketing, and I've just kind of learned as I've gone along.
Yeah.
Today, I work with a whole range of clients, for-profit, nonprofit, product, services. I've had the opportunity to work with you, Natalia, on your brand through
Yes.
different brand life cycles that it's taken. And
Mhm.
we're different. We're not an agency. So agencies are great for people who know what they want, know how to, that they need implementers, want someone else to do it. We work with the companies who know that the brand needs to come from the inside. So again, Office of Awesome, we just wanted an office where clients could come and do awesome work.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And one of the things that I loved about working with you in the past was that you're always very like, you want to make sure that we have like very tangible kind of steps, like very, okay, that's great. That sounds fantastic. But how do you get there? How do you do that? So I've always loved that. So I wanted to talk about how you mentioned you came from like a family business, and I know that you're a very kind of scrappy, do it yourself, find a way to make it happen kind of person, and come from a very kind of humble background, like I myself have.
Mhm.
But we've worked with clients who are a little bit more on the high end side,
Mhm.
and that's always what we aspire to for personal growth, business growth, revenue growth, all of that. But I know that that's a really big block for a lot of people. And especially when I talk to people who want to do interior photography, you have to go from working with real estate agents to high end interior designers. And that's a really big leap for a lot of people.
For sure.
It's kind of talking to a different world. So, in your experience, how have those kind of leaps happened in your business for you? Was there anything that sort of helped propel you into being able to kind of break into these different networks or groups or different kind of clientele?
Mhm. Great question. So I spent probably my 20s fighting it. So there was a good decade, right? So those of you who are getting to this conversation and you're like, God, at least I know I'm aware of it. I wasn't even aware. So to the extent I would tell my husband, like, do you realize I didn't even know anyone who went to work in a business attire? Like growing up, everybody in my world was a tradesperson, a laborer. I didn't know anyone who like went to work in a suit. And so then you have to deal with people, and this is just their everyday. And so it
Yeah.
takes time to be like, okay, this doesn't actually have anything to do with them. This has to do with me. And what I learned in the past couple of years is honestly there is a little bit of prejudice there. And I had to deal with my own prejudice of I was prejudging people just because I didn't know them.
Mhm.
And once I had that awareness that it wasn't a have versus a have not, once it was literally me realizing I hadn't had exposure, that is not their job. It's my job to get comfortable with this.
Mhm.
That changed everything. And I think what happened for me was going from this place of being scrappy, not having resources makes you really creative.
Mhm.
There's almost, I'm going to call it a resentfulness that builds up where you're like, well, other people haven't had to be scrappy. They haven't had to work this hard.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of ugly side of it. And so I invite any of you, and Natalia, you and I have had these conversations
Yeah.
where it's really not the client's job. The client's job is to let you know what they need, pay you the agreed upon amount. That's it.
Yeah.
It's not their job to validate you. It's not their job to make you feel a certain way. Obviously, you need to have boundaries. But
Mm-hmm.
by and large, I find that people who have made it, they are just as hardworking. They rely just as much, their word is their bond, and they need people who are responsive and get the job done. And if your stuff gets in the way of that, that's on you. That's not on them to fix. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And so I mentioned to you before we started recording that I had a conversation about this topic with a mentoree, and I love that you used some of the same exact terminology that I used with her during that conversation, because I completely agree that it's not about them, it's about you. And it's a form of prejudging. One of the things I realized when I started working with kind of the higher end clients is, even if I was comfortable with the designer, I would go to a home and the homeowner would seem, like, oh, they live in this really fancy house and they have all this money, these cars. And that was me projecting that was me judging them, that they were going to be a certain way and look at me a certain way. So yeah, just having that clarity and having that self-awareness is huge, but it does take a lot of time, which I don't think a lot of people give.
Right. And it's not time that you can like mantra yourself through. I don't think. I think you actually have to get out there. So one of the things I started doing is I would volunteer for boards. So I would work with nonprofits and I would work with their board members. And typically board members are expert at fundraising, have access to capital, are professionals. And it made me up my game. But here's the trick, is it was through a nonprofit. So I connected with them through philanthropic work, which let me understand, just because this person's a financial advisor, just because this person's an attorney, they are still looking to do good work. And that was really helpful. It allowed me to just focus on the work. So my first tip always is just focus on the work. I have quotes that I put on my phone, and I will have it pop up at like the same time every day, but it's an odd time. It'll be like 2:07 when you're expecting the text message to come in. I'll have these quotes come up. And one quote, and I'll send it to you, but basically it says, all that matters is that you focus on your craft. That's it. The whole relationship is not between you and a client. It's actually between you and your craft.
Yeah.
Anything that gets in the way of you and the craft, your own ego, your own prejudging, your own resentment, your own sense of scarcity, we set that aside, we focus, we go back to the work. I don't care if the work is pro bono. I don't care if you're getting paid $15 for the work or $15,000 for the work. Go back to it and make that your home.
Yeah, absolutely. And so two things come up when you were talking about that. One is, I love the idea of connecting with people through a nonprofit type of situation, because it almost kind of puts you all on a level field. Also, you suddenly don't feel like there's this big difference in what people do or how much they make or anything like that. You're just all there at the same level helping. The other thing was, when you're talking about it's between you and your craft, I completely agree. And I think one of the things that we struggle with, and I know I still to this day struggle with, is what we consume and how that just gets us so caught up in what other people are doing and what other photographers are doing. And oh my God, look at their work. Mine is nowhere near that level, or mine is not like that, or I don't do shadows that way, or whatever. And that's so important, to just be able to put blinders on and kind of almost ignore what everybody else is doing and just do your thing.
Totally. So what I love about what you just set up is those are actually things we can do something about. So if in your space, for instance, for me, probably quarterly, I will go through all my feeds and I edit. And what I edit for is people who I want to aspire to be like, but they're not triggering for me. So sometimes they're not in my space. Sometimes they're in a totally different space. Right now, there are people who are doing subscription box programs. That's not anything in my world, but I love this one woman. I love how she talks about business. I love how she's just doing it, but pushing herself. So same way with my feeds, I will look at who I'm spending time with. And
Mm-hmm.
if those are people who are reinforcing that resentment, reinforcing crappy bosses, reinforcing I'm not paid what I'm worth, I actually need to kind of find a way to put some distance and then add in people who are putting me in the space that's,
Yeah,
it's not about me, it's about service. It's about doing good work. I'm really proud of the work I did.
exactly.
So if you can edit the intake point that you talked about, whether that's your digital feed, whether that's what's in your inbox and what you're turning to, I love the tool Unroll Me. We've talked about this before, I think.
I think so.
Basically, you can send a newsletters that don't really need to be in front of you. It's a free service. It wraps them all up daily, but you don't have to open them all. You don't
Oh,
have
nice.
to open up all of your Facebook or all of your Instagram feed. Mute all of the stories of anyone who triggers you. Don't actually look at the feed and only look at the stories of people who inspire you.
Yeah.
Like you can edit away, and there are a lot of really good books and tools and theories on how to edit, but
Mhm.
not just digital, in real life too. That helps a lot with what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I love that you put your social media feeds in the context of like, they are your circle.
Mhm.
It's an extension. We always hear about the people that you surround yourself with
Mhm.
have the most influence, but we never think that that includes the people that you surround yourself with digitally too.
Totally. And here's the deal, don't just put in people who are aspirational for you, because that's striving. Put in people who are inspiring to you. There's a nonprofit, it's called Love Beyond Walls.
Mhm.
They are in Atlanta, and they work with people who are experiencing homelessness, and they do it in the spirit of Dr. King, where poverty is an injustice. We all deserve to have homes. Now, I have watched this brand struggle for years, and I have championed them and been like, you guys are doing great work. How can I help? Well, now through all this crisis, Google's now found them and backed them. And even though that's not my world, it's watching a brand that I so love and admire be scrappy, struggle, succeed. I would much rather have that than a lifestyle brand that makes everything look perfect, because
Mm.
that doesn't do anything for me and my work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And you always root for the underdog too, which is kind of awesome.
Well, because we're all in this together. And when you see them succeed, it reminds you that can happen to you too. But it doesn't happen by wishing and hoping. It happens by being out there
Absolutely.
in the world doing the good work.
Yeah. And I think the underdogs often too are just, they're not the ones who are struggling more. Sometimes they're the ones who are just showing the struggle that they have.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think every business has it. It's just whether, how much do you mask it? How much are you hiding it?
Mhm. And what are you trying to do with it? Are you trying to get sympathy? Are you trying to get people to stop and help you? Hey, it's not everyone's job. You need to identify those needs, go and work on them, and then share that with others in order to help others.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where I start to see some magic happen. We're seeing this era of Brene Brown, which one of my clients has connected with her, right? She's talking about the messes. She's talking about a soft front, but she's talking about a firm back, stiff back. So you need both of those things.
Absolutely. I love Brene Brown. So let's see. So as far as we talked about sort of the imposter syndrome, kind of touched on that a little bit and the judgment. Um, as far as on the branding side, from like a branding perspective, um, how how do you even begin to approach marketing or trying to speak to people that you feel are so not in your world?
Yeah.
'Cause
So
there's so
great
much about
question.
there's so much about branding that it feels like a lot of times, you are the brand, and but the people you're talking to aren't like you on the
Yeah.
surface. How do
Yeah.
you begin to try to market to them?
Great question. So the biggest mistake people make is they think, well, I need to put something out that somebody wants, and then it'll bring those people. You actually need to get to know those people in order to know what they actually want. So a great example of this is we work with a lot of athletes, NBA, MLB, Olympic, softball. They have this beautiful cachet and this beautiful following. And it's really intimidating. Like I had a gold winning Olympic medalist come. And I mean, you feel like a dingo because you're like, is she going to bring the medal? Like, no, well, she's not going to bring the medal. But everybody goes through that where it's like, you are just, there's that star power.
Yeah.
And here's the deal. They are still people with to-do lists. That's it. That's all you end up realizing is they are people with to-do lists, and they usually have helpers. And you actually will spend more time working with their helpers than you will with them, specifically as you get into the higher, performers who are on the court. Their full-time job is being an athlete. So they are relying on their support staff. And this is where it's cool, because you probably feel way more comfortable with their support staff than you might with them. So it's thinking through, what does their support staff also need? And that's actually a more accessible conversation for most of us to have than to get blown away. Remember, anyone is just busy. They've got a to-do list. They have their own goals. My background is in retail. So my parents' business is a retail plant nursery. So people come in with plant problems or chicken problems or, fertilizer questions. And we had a counter, and you would just do customer service. You would just listen, figure out what they need, and then talk through a solution. So whenever I get ahead of myself and I get dazzled, I stop and I think, nope, there's a team member there who has a problem, who I need to listen to. And then we're going to ask more questions, and then we're going to come up with a solution. So if you start to spin or spiral, your job is to just slow it down and remember, this is just a person with a to-do list, and you're there to help their helper.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I was trying to think within the interior photography world how that fits in. And you're absolutely right, because oftentimes there's the designer who's doing all the design genius, but then they have their marketing person who's usually the one who's actually working with the photographer to set shoots up and talk about the branding and talk about the look and what they're going for. So
in that moment, if you think about it, if we take that exact example, when you go through and your people are going to do their homework, right? Or I'm going to look at the style. I'm going to look at what's set. I may actually see some places that they could become more on brand. Yeah. That is actually the most valuable thing you could do for that marketing person, which is to come prepared, not with a full plan, but to say, you know what, I've done some homework. I see you guys do it this way. Let's try it with this. But you know what I think could take it up a notch is if we did X. And that's all you need to do. Actually, less is more. So Natalia, when I brought you in for the retail plant nursery, I had a very vague idea. I know that we have to make sales. I know we had a photographer. I think you were kind of bending the rules for me and doing some products.
That was a while ago too.
Yeah, it was so long ago.
Yeah.
But you were so good about being like, I get the feel of this, but you know what would take it up is X. And I have to tell you is we've just had to pivot this client. They're still my client, even though it's the family business. I've had to pivot them with a lot of changes, moving them online. Those photos are still things I go back to.
Good.
Because you thought through it with me, because you had studied the brand, you had studied the aesthetic, and you thought we could take it up a couple notches. And so that type of support, when you guys do that work for your clients, for those designers, if you are a designer, if you're studying your client, doing your homework actually speaks so much more, because what that means is it's another dumb question they don't have to answer because you came informed. And the less dumb questions they have to answer and the better level questions they have to answer, they're not expecting you to have no questions. But if you come in with a better level of questions, they think, I've got someone who's thinking on my behalf. This person's valuable.
That's true, because I think back to some of the moments where clients have commented on being impressed, or I'll ask a question or I'll bring something up that might be an issue down the line, and they're like, oh, I didn't even think of that, or like, oh yeah, good thinking, that didn't even enter my mind.
You've saved them money, you've saved them time, and you've saved them the future headache, which is all they're dealing with all the time. Is issues about money, issues about time, and then worrying about future headaches. So totally, that is exactly the type of service you can provide without overextending or killing yourself. Again, letting your natural craft thoughtfully come through, not just on the aesthetic, but on the practical as well.
Yeah. And I do feel like a lot of that happens more when you shift from thinking about kind of how nervous you are or what they think of you, and you shift it to, how am I serving them? What do they need? What are they looking for?
Yes. And here's where people go awry, though, is they think they need to figure, and I'm totally guilty of this, that they need to figure A to Z out. Actually, with a new client and a new opportunity, they will typically give you a very protracted agreement. They'll say something like, let's test this out. Let's actually just do this one shoot, or let's do this one room even. And you'll feel like, God, I'm going to have to go to all this trouble to put together a proposal for this one thing. But what it is they have dealt with so many problems before. They only want to date you. But if that first date goes really well, then there's follow-up. And then all of a sudden they're texting you with, hey, can you come in this day? Because I just need, and you become part of their hurricane. You become part of their world, and you realize nobody is as prepared as you feel like they are at that first step. That first proposal, it's just a boundary that they want to make sure when they let someone in, you're qualified and they can trust you, and you're going to produce those results.
Totally. That reminds me of, I always tell people that one of the sort of mindset shifts for me happened early on when, so you and I met at the co-working space, and it's all females. And I remember when I first started there, it was really intimidating because it's like all these women who are very experienced and they've been in the corporate world and they look very like sleek and put together. And it didn't take too long or too many meetings before I realized like they don't know what they're doing either. And once I started to realize like, holy crap, nobody really has it together. Nobody really knows what they're doing. Everyone's kind of making it up as they go. And that was a huge light bulb moment for me.
But again, what you just said right there is you actually had to get to know people. You weren't able to do that. If you stayed from I just pop in, pop out, I don't get to know people, then my assumptions, my prejudging stays true.
That's true.
And I keep having to work through that with myself, particularly if you are more comfortable with your work leading the way instead of you leading the way. The work will meet them and will be kind of two representatives meeting each other instead of who's actually behind their meeting.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's the scary part, is sticking around and actually interacting and getting past that initial part. By the way, I'm so glad that the nursery photos are still like relevant for you, because those chickens were not the easiest to work with.
We'd like chickens and feed and burlap and texture. And I was like, I really have no idea, but you did. And again, there have been so many times where I'll have these odd situations come up for my clients, and you're the first person I text because I'm like, hey, I don't really know how to figure this out, but I know you're someone who likes to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
And when you go in, not, I have everything perfect. When you go in with this, I've worked with you before, we'll figure it out. That's actually what people remember. There's a beautiful Maya Angelou quote, which is, people remember how you made them feel, not what you did for them. That sense of security, that sense of figuring it out, that sense of getting in the trenches is what people will return to you from, as much as the aesthetic that you can produce.
True. Yeah. I cannot speak highly enough of treating every single client as a collaboration.
Yes.
Like, you are not a receipt number. You're not an invoice number. Like, I expect you to put in the work with me. So I totally believe in that. One thing that I was thinking about when I was kind of preparing for our chat today was how much, when we talk about giving ourselves kind of time and experience to sort of settle into and kind of own what we do and get more confident and get to know our expertise and what we can offer of service to others, the value of having those crappy clients that show you what you don't want to work with as much as what you do want to work with. And I know we've talked a lot about all the messes I've gotten myself into before. Can you speak a little bit to that, about like, I don't know if you've had, I'm sure you've had experience with horrible, nightmarish kind of situations. I think we all go through that.
Yeah.
But the value of that, because I feel like that kind of feeds into your confidence and your expertise and giving you that gut strength to be like, no, I need to be with those higher up clients and not with these other guys.
Yeah. And oh man, like, no one wants to talk about this. Everyone wants to be like, if you just use the script, you can avoid the pain of ever having that again. No, because you don't see it coming. I don't care how many times you've had it. If you saw it coming, you wouldn't be in that position.
I'm always so optimistic with you. I'm like,
but again, everybody's a mess. And the question is, do they know they're a mess? Do they take accountability for their own mess? Or do they deflect that mess on other people. So that's really, it doesn't matter. I mean, honestly, and you guys probably do this too, where sometimes you work with the bigs so you can afford to work with the littles, right? So you'll do bigger work, maybe work that doesn't like speak to your soul all the time. But then you can work with smaller ones who like are coming up or are growing or do need those resources. So I think it's important to note that there's so much choice in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what barriers and what boundaries you don't have in place. And the universe will keep giving you those folks until you have learned that lesson. And then it will keep testing you, girl. Have you learned the lesson? For me, it's a little bit weird when I look back because my prejudging bigger projects lost me work, but it got me lots of small work. And I don't think I was really aware of that. So I have a co-founder at Office of Awesome, and her name is Leah. And Leah is built for corporate. She is built for big numbers. She is built to this little stuff. She'll let me have it. She'll work on me with it. But man, she thrives when a really big client walks through the door. And so what would happen, and I had the fortune of having this co-founder with me, we would go into these meetings and I would kind of nod and be like, okay, okay, okay. And then we would leave the meetings and I would be like, I don't understand what they're doing. This doesn't make any sense. And she'd be like, why didn't you say that in the room? And I was like, well, I'm not going to be like, I don't understand what you're doing. You guys don't make any sense. And so what would happen is it would just get really bogged down where I would have all these questions and I didn't know how to phrase the questions in the room. So then they would think, okay, we kind of want to work with her. We think she's smart, but we're not exactly sure what they can do with us. And literally about a year ago, January was the peak worst of it. We went into this beautiful office. It's in La Jolla, which it is a very wealthy neighborhood in San Diego, has an ocean view. And literally this company manages the portfolios of the ultra wealthy. And so this is just stacked upon stacked upon stacked, right? Like I show up in my Prius, the right door is banged in. And like, it doesn't bother me, but you all go through the same thing, right? Yeah. We get in here and they had challenges, but I did not speak up. I just kind of said, okay, well, it sounds like you want to do this. And they're like, but do we, or do we want to do something else? And I'm like, I don't know. You manage the portfolios of the uber wealthy. I don't know what you would do. And so we just left this meeting with everyone being like, I don't know. And I got in that car and I just started crying because I knew that like I wasn't helpful. I didn't understand the problem. That was a nightmare. And I didn't even get engaged to do the work. But what it taught me was I have to go in with better questions and I have to push them. And I have to, even if I'm not the right fit, we have to get through that discomfort of not knowing. Even if it's not me, we have to get to them a solution because that's actually the service that I'm there to do. So for you, even if you're too high a price point, even if you know that you don't really want to work with them long term, but what they're trying to do isn't the right fit, working your way through the discomfort of those conversations, it took me a solid year. And that was probably 30 of those hard conversations before I understood when you go in there, you have to push through. You cannot, if what they are suggesting is wrong or what they are suggesting won't work, it's up to you to tell them that. That is actually the second part of living your expertise. The aesthetic part is where we're comfortable. Yeah. If I can look beautiful, they'll get it. This is the business side of it. And I give Leah so much credit for pushing me. And if you don't have someone like Leah who tells you what you don't want to hear, get you one.
Yeah.
They're usually a little bit older. They usually see you and call you out for wasting your time by trying to be nice. And that feels really icky when they call you on it. But damn, it saved me a good decade of just chasing my tail.
Yeah, absolutely. And God, do we love to chase our own tails.
It's more comfortable. And honestly, the client came back about 8 months later.
Oh, nice.
And I didn't expect it. But when they came back, I was like, oh, now I'm ready. But it took me those 8 months after crying in the car.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's, you mentioned one really important thing is aside from needing those experiences and that pain to work through, coming out of it and wiping your tears and being like, okay, what did I learn? Like, that happened. It sucked. I got to learn something from that. It has to serve you somehow.
Yep.
And I think that's one thing I've always tried to do. I think I've been pretty good at it, but
Totally. Because
being
what people normally do is they're like, well, I'm not meant to do this. This is a sign that I'm not. No, the question is, do you love your craft more than you don't like this? Because if you love your craft more, you'll find the lesson in it and you'll keep going.
right. And I think a lot of that is owning your responsibility in that pain, just being like, it's not all them. I had a role in that too. That pain happened because of me too.
It
And
doesn't mean you're an awful person. It just means you have to learn how to do it differently the next time.
the universe is kicking your butt to teach you a lesson.
But it will serve you because then you'll be equipped to work at that higher level with those bigger numbers. So the other part of your question was, how do you speak to these people? So that was like all about me, right? That was about me sucking, about me not asking the right questions, about like me crying in my car. What I said earlier, which was listening. When you listen to the actual problem they're having, and then you start to hear that problem repeated. So what I hear a lot from clients is, we have agencies, we don't really know what they're doing. So what that's told me is I actually need to help them audit what they currently have to see if that's a fit or not. So for you guys, instead of thinking, I need to present the perfect solution, actually stepping back and listening, okay, maybe right now they're just doing room by room work. So instead of doing a whole house shoot, maybe it makes sense to do a package that's actually featuring a room and talking about how you can switch accessories out and optimize what's in this room. We actually have a design client right now, and we're working through what her audience really needs. So before you try to market, before you try to brand, the better you can get at actually hearing the pain points of your, because again, you're out there. Even if they choose not to go with you, listen to the reasons why they said no, because they're telling you something that you can then use in your business.
And what if they're not, I mean, I would assume yes, but do you recommend just directly asking, hey, why did this not work out? Why did you go with somebody else? If
they don't have the time, you're never going to get an answer. So if you don't have the relationship and they don't have the time, it's not on you. They're just not going to stop to answer. Yeah. But if you have the relationship with them, if they have advocated for you, what I always say is something to the tune of, the only way I'm going to make it as a business owner is if I know where I could have done something better. Mm-hmm. Do you mind doing me the favor of being really honest with me? Is there anything here that I could have done better so that way in the future, not with you guys, but with other people, I don't make the same mistake again?
Yeah.
So what you do, instead of saying, why didn't I make this sale? Why didn't you give me money? You're actually saying, I'm actually asking you human to human to stop and reflect back to me, even if you're not exactly sure why. And very often that will allow them to say, you know what? We had two people we were going with. Your stuff, it was good, but this is what we needed. I've even had it, and don't expect this to happen, but I've had it where people are like, you know, your proposal was weak. What I'll do is I'll send you the proposal of the person we went through. And I just want you to look and see why we had to make that call. Yeah. And those people, I will never say who they were, because that they were vulnerable and they did something they probably shouldn't have, but they will share with you because they want you to get better. Mm-hmm. And the younger you are, the scrappy you are, more you want the feedback, when you show up from that place, people will give you that over and over again.
True. Showing that vulnerability. And
but not asking them to validate your pain. You're asking them to help you figure out what's not quite working.
Yeah.
Stay in that business lane. Don't go in, because they don't have the energy. They're already dealing with enough of their own.
Yeah. Whenever I wrap up a set of sessions or a program with a mentoree, one of the things I always ask them what they loved. And then I ask them what would have made it even better.
Yep.
What would have made it just more awesome of an experience. And that's kind of my way of saying, like, what can I improve?
Yep.
So,
and hear what you're saying. Every time you steered it back to mentoree, there's something about not just putting yourself again with aspirational people, but putting yourself with people that who are climbing the ladder just a rung below that makes you show up as your best self. So if you feel like I have nothing to give, I have nothing to offer, I keep failing at stuff, find you somebody, even if they are not in your space, even if it's just someone online who you're able to show up for, you show up as a better person. And that's what the people who are a couple rungs ahead of you are doing. Yeah. They are showing up better because they want you to come along with the ride.
Yeah, totally. I love that.
And I do have a couple resources that I'm going to send you so you can put in like show notes or whatever. There's a book that I'm in the middle of right now. It's called Moving Up Without Losing Your Way. And it is just about that. It's about if you are the first to do something. They do a lot of work with first generation college students. I'm one. But they talk about how you take these steps and what happens in kind of a Malcolm Gladwell sort of way. And Jennifer Morton is the author.
Okay.
There's also a book called The Tools, and it's used as much for personal development. I use it for a lot of these kinds of uncomfortable business conversation. And they have 5 tools in there that you can pull out at any time when things get scary. And so for one of the examples, they have a guy who's a stand-up comedian who had terrible stage fright. But he loved doing comedy. And so it's kind of like, you probably see that in yourself where you're like, I hate X part of this business, but I love this part. And I don't know how to reconcile them. And instead of trying to be like, if I just get away from all the business stuff, if I just do the aesthetic, someone will find me. What it's saying is you actually need to lean towards the awful because that'll make you better. It made him a better stand-up comedian, but it'll make you a better whatever it is you're here to do. So those are 2 books that I always go back to. I have on audiobook, The Tools, because I need to constantly practice them.
Nice. I had not heard of either of those books. I'm excited to. They really both sound right up my alley. So I'm excited.
But also at certain times you're like, I hate this. Why did I read this? Because then you have to do something with the information.
Yeah.
And the other tip that I do want to give you is continue to have a group, a gathering. I've got 2 people who come from the same neighborhood I came from, they did not have anyone who's done this before, and they're all going through this the same way. But in different ways, we're ahead of each other. So we're pushing. So one of the girls, she grew up like a block away from me in City Heights. She has a very, very high-end salon. And she has cut Robert Downey Jr.'s hair when he's on vacation. Exactly. So she is in the same space. Like her rent is 5 figures. So when you have people who are doing it with you, but who have come from a similar space and are doing it anyway. Another friend came from and relied heavily upon social services. She now works for the philanthropy who supports these social services organizations.
Amazing.
But she has to deal with her own questions and why she's here. And they all have a different upbringing, different responsibilities. Build yourself that group text message and be there for them, and they'll be there for you. And you guys will all do this together, just like you're doing with your community, with your Grow community, Natalia.
Awesome. Yeah, no, absolutely. Building a community is crucial.
But it's not I'm going to put it out and be perfect. It's those few people who you can be like, I think I might poop my pants today because this is so uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
And then they can be there because they came from where you came from and they're succeeding anyway. In spite, there's no reason you can't either.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely. I love that. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up because I think we could probably talk for hours on this. Yeah. But I want to leave people with, if there was 1 or 2 sort of really concrete action items that they could take away from this to do like immediately, kind of like if you do nothing else right now, what would you recommend they do to start kind of shifting their thoughts a little bit, work with their clientele they aspire to work with?
Yeah, edit your feeds. So we talked about that earlier, but the second part is start following the select parts of clients that you know, even if they're X, they're still super cool. So for you, that might be, maybe it's a Reese Witherspoon or Christy Teigen, where yes, they are aspirational clients, but they also just seem super cool and loving of you and anyone, and like let people's freak flags fly. Finding those types, it will bring down the fear factor. They're still just people. They're still just dealing with stuff, figure out who you want to surround yourself with, and then go ahead and edit. And then right now, if we're kind of still doing a lot of Zoom meetings, start scheduling meetings with people who might intimidate you a little bit. Maybe it's a vendor, maybe it's a real estate agent. Right now, people have time to connect. Go and make that ask. You're much more likely to get a yes from busy people because we're slowing down collectively for a time. So go out, make that coffee, make that appointment. And I challenge you, if you think I'm one of those people, if you're like, well, I would like to know more about that, please reach out, ask me for that, push yourself in that direction. You will be surprised what comes up from people wanting to help people on the ladder as we all climb up it together.
Totally. And yeah, this is an ideal time to ask people for that because they don't have to drive anywhere. They don't have to like fight traffic
and they want to get away. They want to connect. They want to get away from whatever's going on outside that door.
Exactly. Exactly. Awesome. Thank you so much. There was so much good juiciness in this conversation. I loved it. I knew there would be. I'm going to post the resources that you had, the 2 books and your links and all of that goodness on the actual blog post that has the video so that people can connect with you. And yeah, go enjoy your family. Go enjoy your doggies. And thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to chat with us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Natalia.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon, Rebecca.
Bye.
Bye.